riders and crew, this oasis is closing. Greetings. I'm Christian Miller, your crew coordinator for Breaking AIDS Ride. Greetings from Grant's Tomb National Monument. Here come the riders.
Yeah, riders! Yeah!
Woo! Yeah, Kristen. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. So I just got in from Cooperstown, but where are the riders?
Here they come.
Good afternoon, y'all, and welcome to the closing ceremony of Breaking AIDS Ride 2020. I'm your hostess, Candy Samples, and I'm here to bring the love to your living rooms. You know, this has been a tough year. So many people have been sick, and so many are lost. I think we're all sad that the ride had to be virtual this year. But I tell you what, we haven't lost. We haven't lost the community spirit, or the caring, or the love. And as Charles King likes to say, love really does conquer hate. So we're here this afternoon to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Housing Works. 30 years, y'all. And to mark that date, we're ending AIDS as an epidemic in New York. In the midst of one pandemic, we're hitting a major milestone in another pandemic that took so many of our loved ones. And do you know what? That is something to celebrate. I want to turn it over now to one of our riders who has seen so much of the AIDS epidemic. He's seen it all and he's lived to tell about it. Please welcome rider 102, Craig Pinkney.
Hey everybody. I want to thank Housing Works and the Breaking AIDS Ride for giving me a chance to speak. This is the 11th straight year I've been a part of the ride, and getting to know Housing Works and the moral purpose they serve of fighting for some of our most vulnerable community members living with HIV, AIDS, and homelessness has always inspired me. As a Black man, I have seen how both crises have disproportionately devastated Black and Brown communities. I've witnessed them devastate my own family, and I still see this devastation today. I know firsthand that if we're going to be serious about ending the double pandemics of HIV, AIDS, and homelessness, we have to call out how they both disproportionately impact communities of color and fight for equity for our communities. What I appreciate about Housing Works and its founder, Charles King, so much is that they have not only said this truth out loud, but they've been doing the work with our communities. When Housing Works fights for resources to help end AIDS and homelessness, they're fighting for communities of color. When they fight against cuts to healthcare and housing support, they are fighting for communities of color. When Charles King and allies from Housing Works go to Albany and Washington, D.C. to protest and advocate and get arrested fighting for the lives of those living with HIV, AIDS, and homelessness, they are fighting for our equity. And we all know that Charles has never shied away from a fight. And here we are in 2020, so much closer to the end of AIDS in New York State, and we are in the midst of a new pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen in 100 years, except we have. We've seen it in the devastation of the AIDS pandemic. And just like that pandemic, COVID-19 is hitting communities of color the hardest. Today, Housing Works is in the thick of the fight, offering resources for those living with homelessness and COVID-19, advocating for access to the healthcare these vulnerable communities need to survive the COVID pandemic, a need amplified by the long-lived pandemic of systemic racism that makes it worse for people of color, just as Housing Works did and still does fighting HIV, AIDS, and homelessness. It's an honor to be connected to an organization that is committed to being the change we need to see in the world, to a loving community that participates in the healing ritual of the ride year after year with the same moral purpose: to end AIDS, to end homelessness, and now to fight the devastation of COVID-19 that hits our communities the hardest. In other words, to fight for the dignity that is every single person's right, but is systemically denied to so many. And we can do it. We can end all of this. We can win this fight together. To those who have donated, thank you. To those who have put their love and sweat equity into the effort to fundraise on bikes or on crew or in planning, thank you. And to Charles and the Housing Works community for walking the talk of fighting for the end of AIDS by 2020, for fighting for access to healthcare and housing, for stepping up to support us through yet another pandemic that has laid bare the inequities in our country, and for bringing your passion and expertise to this fight. We thank you. We might not have been able to be on our bikes as a family like we wanted to be, but we are all still here. We are all still fighting, and we are all of us still committed to ending AIDS and building a more equitable world together. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks, Craig. I want to take a second to welcome our friends in the general public who are with us this afternoon. Maybe you already donated to a rider or a crew member, and if you did, thank you. But if you haven't donated yet, or if today you're feeling a bit more inspired to give a bit more, well, we'd be honored with your additional gift. Just go to breakingaidsride.org/donate. Thank you so much for your support. And speaking of support, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors for the ride this year. Think, ViiV Healthcare, and Janssen Pharmaceuticals. Thank you for supporting the ride. Next, I want to bring someone in who's seen the amazing work that Housing Works does from all angles. She's the manager of the front desk at the Housing Works headquarters, so you know she's seen it all. And Housing Works board member, LaDawn Sebastian.
Hi, my name is LaDawn Sebastian. I am the front desk receptionist for the corporate office. I also sit on the Health Service Board, and I also am the Safety and Security Committee. I'm truly grateful for what this agency has done for me. It has taught me a better way to live. It has also taught me how to love and respect people for who they are and where they come from. I want to sincerely thank the advocates and truly thankful for the Breaking AIDS riders.
Thank you so much, LaDawn. Housing Works has saved a lot of lives over the past 30 years, but at the same time, we have lost so many friends and loved ones too. Let's take a moment now in silence to remember them. Thank you. Now let's head back to Grant's tomb and welcome a man who needs no further introduction to most of you. He's rider number 2 and CEO of Housing Works, Charles King.
Good evening, Breaking Age Ride participants, family, and friends. The first thing I want to say is, whatever you did, whether it was riding a bike, walking long distances, or baking cookies, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for participating in this virtual Breaking Age Ride in this most tumultuous year and tumultuous season. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Many of you have expressed that the reason you come back year over year is both your passion about ending HIV as an epidemic, but also the camaraderie that happens when we spend 3 intense days and nights on the road together, whether as crew or as riders, and build a bond that feels like family that carries us through the coming year. This year we had to do without that. So all you had to do it for was just your love and your commitment to ending AIDS as an epidemic. And that's why I am so especially grateful this year, more than any other, that you were committed and hung in there and made yourself a part of this particular adventure. Now, I'm wearing the t-shirt that we would normally be giving out just before the closing ceremony. But to be perfectly honest, it's actually Wednesday evening, videoing my closing ceremony remarks. And I'm only halfway through my commitment to ride 300 miles over 6 days. I started on Monday, going up the east side of the Hudson River to Sleepy Hollow, then across the new bridge and down the west side from Nyack. Even took in River Road, so I could say that I'd gotten in my hill climb. I still have Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx left to do, but we're going to get it done, and then I'll truly be able to wear this t-shirt if one of my kids doesn't steal it from me first. As you can see, I'm standing in front of Grant's tomb. I asked Asher Moniz to meet me here to do this video because I wanted to be in a place where I could capture the feeling, the sounds, the smell, the visual of our closing ceremony, which we've held here for the last 2 years. The Brazilian band drumming, all of the family and friends throwing water on the crew, all that good stuff that we do together before we break our no alcohol fast and go have a beer together, which I hope we'll be doing as we're watching this ceremony virtually. But I want to point out that when we first had our closing ceremony here 2 years ago, it occurred only a couple of weeks after I had made a pilgrimage to Montgomery, Alabama to visit the Legacy Museum, which recounts the history of the internal slave trade here in the United States that moved over 3 million men, women, and children who were sold and bought and moved further south to harder labor. After that, the Jim Crow laws that put people who'd just gotten their freedom back into bondage, and then traces into the new Jim Crow, mass incarceration, and what it's done to the black community here in the United States. And so what I said to you at that closing ceremony was that I had made a vow after visiting that and then going to the the lynching memorial and being very moved by that, that we really needed to place fighting racism at the center of our efforts to end AIDS and HIV as an epidemic here in the United States. That if we don't address the racism and misogyny that cause so much harm to people, including increased HIV infection among them, that we're not going to be able to really end HIV as an epidemic. Well, we've seen what has happened this last year. As I spoke earlier about the COVID-19 pandemic, and I talked about it impacting on the elderly, impacting on people who had chronic conditions. What I failed to mention and want to underscore right now is how devastating the COVID pandemic has been on Blacks and Latinos in this United States. Far greater impact on those two communities than on any other. And it's been Asian Americans who've borne the brunt of COVID stigma. So now the disparities in health that we knew were happening in HIV are plain for the entire world to see. You can see it in who got sick, you can see it in who died. And it's a condition that we really have to address. And then with the modern day lynchings that we saw with folk like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor really slapping us upside the head to tell us that it's not just the racism that comes but with environmental circumstances, structural racism that impacts on people's ability to get a job, to move where they want to live, to generate and acquire wealth. But indeed, we are still literally lynching people because of the color of their skin. And then now, our president spewing white supremacist ideology, spewing racial hatred everywhere he goes. We have our work cut out for us. And I'm here to tell you that we are going to achieve an end to HIV and AIDS, but we can't do it unless we put addressing the racism that taints everything we touch in this country to an end. So thank you for being a part of this ride. I want you to know I had done something while riding. I went out and got a copy of Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. I urge you to pick up a copy and read it through, read it carefully, and then let's figure out together how we can take more deliberate steps, not just raising funds, but action every single day to fight racism across this country, even as we work to end the AIDS epidemic and transform our country into a better place than it was before COVID came. Thank you so much.
And now I'd like to turn it over to the ride director of Breaking AIDS Ride, rider number 50, Eric Epstein.
Thank you, Candy, and hi, everybody. So next year, we're riding September 10th to 12th, 2021, and I hope you're all going to join us. Cooperstown to New York. If you're already registered this year, or if you were registered this year as a rider or a crew member, you're already on our list. You're going to get all the information about next year as soon as we have it available. If you weren't a rider or a crew member this year, but want to get information for next year, I'm going to make it really easy for you. Just go to breakingaidesride.org, scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, and on the lower right-hand corner, there's a form. Fill out your name, your email address, and that's it. That'll get you on the list. You'll be the first to know everything that's happening for next year's ride. I hope you'll join us. All right, I'm going to send it back to the gorgeous Candy Samples to take us home.
Thank you, Eric. Well, we've reached the end of our ceremony. I hope that we've brought you a little bit of joy and love. Thank all y'all for sharing your light with me. But I'm going to leave with one promise and one parting request. I will be back in person next year. Will you? Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you real soon on Breaking AIDS Ride.